5 seconds. If for some reason you are unable to, you lose your connection via Zoom, we will be live streaming this via PCC TV. And so I want to welcome you this morning to our first day of our inaugural UnConference. And I invite you to introduce yourself into the chat. If you want to send a message only to the panelists, select the panelists. Otherwise, we invite you to share your thoughts and what you're thinking about for the fall semester in the chat to all the panelists and attendees. And I'm going to start by handing it over to our provost to get us started. Dr. Duran Sarda.
Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. I would like to ground us in the knowledge that we gather on the traditional, cultural, and ancestral lands of the Tohono O'odham and of the Pascua Yaqui. Our indigenous brothers and sisters, who are often represented as being part of the past, are still very much here and active in this community. As an educational institution that values learning, I invite you to learn more about the lands on which we live, work, and learn. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Dolores Duran Cerda, and I am Provost and Executive Chancellor for Academic Affairs at Pima Community College. On behalf of Pima Community College, I'd like to welcome everyone, all of you, our Pima family, our community members, our friends outside of Tucson, and our very special guest today, our keynote speaker, Dr. Laura Rendon, to Pima's inaugural Fall 2020 Virtual UnConference. This two-day event, titled Beyond Imagination, the Fierce Urgency to Claim the Heart of Education, is co-sponsored by the Teaching and Learning Center and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. Both fall under the Office of the Provost. I'd also like to thank the organizers of this event who worked very hard to bring all of us together to have this dialogue. And that is Dr. Maisie Mad, Kate Schmidt, Hilda Ladner, and Yolanda Gonzalez. We hope that you'll join us tomorrow as well, where our keynote speaker is Dr. Ibrahim X. Kendi. Without a doubt, these past few months have been turbulent. We were faced with uncharted waters. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. We haven't seen this magnitude of unemployment since the Great Depression. And the country is still mourning over the murder of Mr. George Floyd. We are coping with pain, loss, grief, and despair. At the same time, amidst the chaos, we have also seen expressions of love, empathy, compassion, and our sense of humanity. In education, we were called to the fierce urgency of finding new ways to teach and learn. From one day to the next, educators from across disciplines and institutions completely revised their pedagogy and in some cases, their curriculum. What was painfully evident were the inequities our students faced in accessing technology, for example. The inequities were already there before COVID, but the pandemic highlighted them even more. And institutions scrambled to address the lack of access as best as we could. Also, questions arose about the new virtual environment. How do we retain our students until the end of the semester? How do we keep our students engaged? How do we create a sense of belonging and validation in the virtual mode of instruction? But out of chaos can come new beginnings. And that is where Pima and all institutions are right now. We have the opportunity to transform and act. Let's reflect on the title of today's UnConference, Beyond Imagination, the Fierce Urgency to Claim the Heart of Education. Beyond imagination. We need to stop imagining, reimagining, and dreaming, and start acting to right the wrong, to bring true equity and social justice beyond semantics and checklists. Claim the heart of education. We need to educate the whole student, not only intellectually, but emotionally and socially. This pandemic has exacerbated already existing oppressive systems that lead to inequities and injustices. We are at a point in history where and what we do today will dictate the future, hence the fierce urgency of now. The heart of education is about empowering and equipping our students to have better, relevant lives and jobs, and to build a better life for all and a better future. And this all starts in the classroom with teaching and learning. It is our calling, it is our responsibility, but it doesn't stop there. It has to be institutional wide. There needs to be transformation in higher education. Institutions have to relook and reform and revamp their policies, systems, and procedures and curriculum, for example, to address the inequities of today. We can learn from scholars and innovators like Dr. Laura Rendon. For example, Dr. Rendon has created a pedagogic framework called Sensi Pensante, Sensi, sensing, pensante, thinking, which emphasizes intellectual, social, emotional, and spiritual student development along with social activism. I'd like to end with a quote from Dr. Rendon from her piece, Realizing a Transformed Pedagogical Dream Field, Recasting Agreements for Teaching and Learning. Quote, the foundation of a new dream of education is a more harmonic, holistic vision of education that honors the whole of who we are as intellectual, compassionate, authentic human beings who value love, peace, democracy, community, diversity, and hope for humanity. Please enjoy the day, and together, let's claim, own, and act on the heart of education in the new normal. Thank you. Muchas gracias. So now I'd like to pass it on to Dr. May Zimad, our coordinator for the Teaching and Learning Center.
Thank you, Dolores, and thank you everyone again for joining us. I want to thank the provost and the chancellor for continuing to support the Teaching and Learning Center and to support teaching and learning at Pima Community College. I want to also thank the Teaching and Learning Center team, Lisa Schumacher, Kate Schmidt, Kathleen Hernandez, who did a lot of the work behind the scene. And I also want to thank PCC-TV and IT. And I also want to thank two people, Kathy Budway from Adult Education and Jeff Thies from Developmental Education, who we had been planning for this UnConference to take place in March before the pandemic hit. And so the vision for this was really started last year. And so as Dolores says, very beautifully articulated the vision behind the theme, I want to say just a little bit more about the theme. So the Beyond Imagination, Fierce Urgency to Claim the Heart of Education this theme was influenced by two teachers. And the first one is Dr. King, who in his 1967 speech talked about the fierce urgency of now. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. And then he called upon us, upon society, to engage in vigorous action and positive action. And the theme is also inspired by the work of Parker Palmer, who wrote very beautifully The Courage to Teach and talked about the heart and the heart of education. And in this piece, he talks about how we are together. The first habit of the heart, we're all in this together. And so I want to invite you to listen with your heart to today's presentation. I want to say a little bit about our keynote speaker. I am so delighted to have Dr. Rendon with us here today. She is a professor emeritus at the University of Texas in San Antonio. She's also a national consultant, thought leader, and speaker at over 100 institutions throughout the nation. Her focus is on topics such as student success, Latinx STEM students, and sensing, thinking, deep learning experiences, as well as self-care and healing. Dr. Rendon developed validation theory. A graduate from the University of Michigan, she focused on asset-based student success framework, which has been used throughout the country to develop programs and to imagine and enact student success models. She is a fellow of the Mind and Life Institute, a member of the board of the directors of the John Gardner Institute for Excellence in Undergraduate Education, and a former fellow of the Fetzer Institute. In 2013, the Texas Diversity Council awarded her the title of being one of the most powerful and influential women in Texas. Her personal archives are part of the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American collection at the University of Texas at Austin, which is one of the premier libraries in the world focused on Latin American and Latinx studies. I have admired Dr. Rendon's work for years, and I remember the first time reading one of her articles on the recasting the agreement. The first thing that I thought of was, I want to bring her to Pima. We didn't even have a teaching and learning center, but I thought I want to bring her to Pima, and I want my colleagues to experience the sweetness I experienced from reading her words. She talks in her writing about knowledge, not from a dualistic perspective, but from an illuminating perspective, where I become someone that is one with the knowledge, where the knowledge illuminates and I illuminate back. May we all experience and come to know an education that embraces and enhances our wholeness. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Rendon.
Thank you everyone. So pleased to be part of your event today. Provost Duran Cerda, what a beautiful introduction to this session. It just makes me feel very welcome, but also to know that your thinking is aligned with my thinking and the way that we need to move forward now as we find ourselves in the middle of chaos. I want to thank also May Simat, for her very gracious invitation, and to all the technicians who helped to put all of this together, and really to all of you who are part of this event today. I hear there's over 500, and growing. So thank you all for spending some time with us today. I want to begin by just saying a little bit about how I step into this inquiry, and also to honor my ancestors in the South Texas borderlands, the Coahuiltecans, also known as Comanches, and Comanches and Apaches, and the Payaya people were the indigenous people whose territory encompassed what is known as San Antonio, Texas today. And many of us know that the area here in South Texas was colonized by Spain, and later France invaded Mexico. At one point, all of the Southwest from California to Texas, including Arizona, was a part of Mexico. And so I have a mixed ethnic racial background, 35% from the indigenous Americas and Mexico, 31% Spain, 12% Portugal, and 10% France. This is all from a test that I did with Ancestry.com. So you learn a lot when you do that sort of DNA testing. On your left, you see a picture of me. This is my 6th birthday in Laredo, Texas. I'm a border woman born along the US-Mexico border in Laredo, Texas. And I wanted nothing more than a pair of moccasins for my 6th birthday. To my right is my sister, Ileana, who became a high school teacher. And to my left is my cousin, Elma. And you see the home that we lived in the back, kind of more like a shack. We didn't have a lot of money, so I grew up in poverty. I grew up as someone who had hopes and dreams, but didn't quite know how to realize them. And so my journey has been a difficult one, overcoming many, many challenges, but moving all the way from, the barrio of Laredo, Texas, to the academy. I do have an AA degree from San Antonio College, but then I also have a PhD from the University of Michigan. So the question is, how does someone like me, who grew up living in a house like that you see in front of you, how does she succeed? I mean, how does she get to be a scholar and a speaker who now spends time talking to multitudes of faculty and staff in 2- and 4-year colleges across the nation? Many people ask, how did I do it? And so I want to share a little bit about the students that I've interviewed who share how they did it, which, that experience is very, very much aligned to how I did it, how I succeeded. So today we're also going to talk about this whole notion of, we find ourselves in this era of despair, as the provost talked about, of chaos. But I think that there's a gift in there as well. In that chaos is also opportunity. In that chaos is also hope. In that chaos, for us educators, is the ability to rethink what we've done with education and come up with a post-pandemic model of education that can foster greater success, especially for low-income first-generation students. And then we also need to think about, what are the new competencies that are going to be needed in our post-pandemic world? How are we going to help them? How are we going to help students to deal with, the advancements in technology, which are advancing very, very fast? I'll talk a little bit about that as well today. But also, very importantly, as the provost was talking about, with equity and justice issues confronting the nation and the world. So we've got to, I believe, help our students to act with love and with compassion, to work to heal the world, to provide hope, especially for the victims of social and economic injustices, the most vulnerable among us that the pandemic has hit very, very hard. And at the same time, I think we need a model that helps students to reach an elevated consciousness, a heightened sense of illuminated knowledge, or what Gloria Anzaldúa calls conocimiento. So let me begin with one of the things that I think we need to turn our attention to as we develop this post-pandemic model of education. And that is the importance of working effectively with students through validation. The action that needs to take place here is to work with a validation-rich academic and student support system. So in the 1990s, I developed the theory of validation. And I have to say that validation has never been more popular. Everywhere that I go, I meet someone who says, I used your validation theory in my dissertation. If you Google validation theory, you're going to find thousands of links. So this theory has really, really taken off. And it's an enabling and confirming and supportive process initiated by us, not by the students, but us taking the initiative to validate students. And there are two forms of validation: academic and interpersonal validation. And with academic validation, we're talking about when we take action to help students to believe that they can do this, to believe that they can be successful, to acquire confidence in being a college student. And interpersonal validation is when we take action to help students believe that we are there for them. So this is kind of like the ethic of care that Nell Noddings talks about in her research, that we reach out to students in ways that makes them feel that, you know, we're treating them not just like students, but like human beings. So some of the best practices for validation include validating their voice and their experience, so that we understand that knowledge can initiate not just from books and theories, but from the student's personal experience. So we've got research papers that can be rooted in topics in the student's personal experience, and also developing an inclusive curriculum that allows students to see themselves in what they're learning, and communicating to students that they can do this, they can be successful. Because oftentimes students, particularly those that are low income and first generation, they've often been told that they cannot succeed. They've been told, you're not gonna make it. Some of them have never made an A in their lives. And some of them have begun, unfortunately, to internalize the notion that they can't do this. Through validation, we turn all of that around, we throw it in the trash can, and we say, no, you can do this. I'm here for you. I'm going to assist you. And then we need to validate the culture of the students, recognizing their strengths and their contributions to American society. I'm going to talk more about their assets in a little bit. Avoiding deficit models, treating students as human beings, making an effort to learn more about their history and the sacrifices that they've made, and validating their language and cultural traditions. This is a relationship-centered approach to working with students. So I know many of you are doing online learning now. So how do we do validation through online learning? There's a book by Costa Pacansky and Brock, Pacansky-Brock, I should say, that came out this year. And basically they contend that research shows that online learning works best when faculty build regular, positive, and interactive relationships with students. And so they have like at least 100 tips on how to do this kind of online learning. And I believe that tip number 25 is to validate students. So I was happy to see that in this book. So we also need to show up not just as a professor, but as a human being, by conveying caring and support, by praising their success, by checking in with students, particularly at the beginning of class. How are you doing today? Validating their ability to be successful, being reassuring, remaining accessible, using videos to capture our caring and empathy, and letting them know that you're aware of their situations during this very, very difficult time. So one of my favorite TV programs is on Sunday morning, CBS Sunday morning. And they had a little segment on Lizzo. Some of you may know Lizzo. If you don't, you can Google her. She is one of the nation's, and actually an internationally known pop singer. She is a Grammy Award-winning singer, songwriter, and flutist. She plays the flute extremely well, was named Time Magazine's 2019 Entertainer of the Year. When Lizzo is asked, what made the difference for you? She always remembers her band director, Manny Gonzalez. When I saw that clip, I thought Manny Gonzalez was Lizzo's validating agent. In the band, she learned to play the flute, and she uses the flute in her songs. And so I just wanted to share, it's a very short, less than 1 minute video of Lizzo meeting Manny Gonzalez, her validating agent. So Mace, can you play the video?
He was like, we brought him back.
How you doing?
Oh my God, I'm so good. Oh my God.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
You've been doing good.
Wow, I did it tonight. You told my ass. You were like, get it together, girl, because you are special. Apply yourself. Those moments meant so much to me. Hi. He was like,
okay, so there you go. So that is a prime example of what I mean by validation, where Manny Gonzalez basically helped her to believe in herself, saw something in her that maybe at that time she was not able to see in herself. The other thing that's important about this video is that her relationship with Manny Gonzalez happened years ago, but she still remembers that. She still remembers how powerful his validation, his affirmation of her being able to succeed was. And so that's what a really good example of what I mean by validation, because many of our students are going to go and do some wonderful things in the world, and they will remember when we cared. They will remember when we affirmed them. They will remember when we told them you can be successful. So let me move on to the next slide. So validation is very important. The other thing that's very important is leveraging and validating the strengths of students. And this means that we need to work with an asset-based framework. We need to move away with this whole notion that students cannot learn, especially those that are first generation and low income. They do have strengths. They are often not recognized. They're often not acknowledged, but we need to now work with an asset-based framework that recognizes the formidable strengths that students have. And I'm going to talk about those strengths. This is a book that came out a couple of years ago, the Latino Student Guide to STEM Careers. It's edited by me and Vijay Kanagala, who's now a professor at Salem State University. And basically that book is for Latinx community and their families, students as early as middle school who are thinking about getting into STEM careers. And so all the information is there. In the last part of the book includes 14 essays that were written by Latinx individuals who actually completed a STEM degree. So what we did is we took those 14 essays and we analyzed them because we wanted to see, how did they do this? What were their challenges? What helped them to move forward and earn a degree in STEM where they're least represented in colleges and universities? So here's what we learned. The challenges that they experienced range from health issues. Some of them moved from Mexico to the US or from Puerto Rico to the US. They dislocated and they had to learn this brand new world of America. The language, the customs, the traditions were very different from their native countries. Some of them were undocumented, and so they faced legal and financial barriers to college. Some of them experienced racism. Many lacked information. They didn't know about financial aid opportunities. They grew up in communities where no one that they knew was a scientist. They lacked college literacy and STEM information. More challenges included language issues, difficulties with writing, publishing, and presenting, experiencing culture shock, particularly when they were moving from their low-income communities to the world of college. That's not an easy transition to make. So they had to learn the whole new world of college, the new values, the new traditions, the new language. And some of them dealt with academic failure. They might have done well in high school, but when they came to college, it wasn't necessarily the same. Many of them were living in poverty or with limited resources in single parent households. Many of them had family-related issues, such as taking care of their brothers and sisters, expected to contribute to their family. I certainly had to do that. My mother was a waitress for many years. She worked the night shift from 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning for $15 plus tips every week. And so when I was getting ready to go to college, my mother thought I was crazy. She told me, "Estás loca. Who do you think you are? College is for rich people. It's not for people like us. And I knew that basically I had to help her in whatever way that I could. And even though I got financial aid, I always sent part of my financial aid home so that she had money to help the family to survive. Balancing academics while caring for family members. Sometimes a close family member had died and they experienced that sort of shock. And then there were gender-related issues, the lack of women, of course, in STEM programs of study, the experience of being the only person of color or the only woman in class. And so here's a model of how they did it. They did it through financial support, NSF scholarships, grants, etc. They did it through validation, what I just talked about, lots and lots of validation. They did it with their own strengths, what we call ventajas y conocimientos, assets and ways of knowing. They did it by participating in Latinx-centered academic activities and organizations. They did it through the modeling of the family. I certainly did it that way too. My parents worked really hard, backbreaking work. My father was in construction. And I saw how hard they work, and that ethic remained with me till today. And they did it by participating in STEM high impact practices. For example, research with a faculty member, experiential hands-on learning, internships, etc. So that's how they succeeded. I want to say a little bit more about validation. These students did not succeed alone. They had a collective web of support around them. They're beginning in early schooling from teachers, friends, parents, family members who were saying to them, you can do this. College also, mentors, faculty, role models, advisors, counselors, all of these people could also contribute to help them to believe in themselves and to know that they could do this. And so the validation that was provided by all of these validating agents included encouragement, inspiration, academic advice, exposure to STEM, and providing a network of support. So to identify the students' strengths, we turn to Tara Yoso's community cultural wealth model. Yoso contends that even in low-income communities, that some people think, well, there's nothing going on there. There are just many problems, and there's violence. What Yoso says is we need to look deeper, because these people are survivors. These families care about education. These families have capital that is unrecognized by many educators and policymakers in America. Family capital, social capital, navigational, cultural, resistant, linguistic, and aspirational capital. And so as we analyze those essays written by Latinx STEM graduates, we wanted to see if those forms of capital were present in their experience. And indeed they were, and we even found more forms of capital that Yoso did not include in her model. So one of those that we added is the whole notion of giving back. One of my doctoral students, Nicole Salas Reyes, did a beautiful dissertation, award-winning dissertation on giving back in Native communities. And in this case, we learned that STEM graduates wanted to earn their degrees, not just to have a degree to hang on the wall, but they wanted to be of service to the Latinx community and to the greater society. They wanted to address inequities in the underrepresentation of Latinx students in STEM. In other words, they wanted to make our world a better place to live. They wanted to give of themselves to really contribute significantly to the world and to the Latinx community. They also had this beautiful sense of curiosity, a sense of wonder, a sense of discovery. Some of them said, we were the why child in the family. And so here are just a couple of quotes with regard to the asset of giving back. The first is from Rodolfo Jimenez, who has a doctorate in STEM. And he says, I'm grateful for all of the mentors I've had in my life, from family to professors. I feel it is their guidance that has helped me to get to where I am today, and I will never forget this. And that is why I take it upon myself to make sure that I give back to my community as well as the world. And Marina Suarez, who teaches geology at UTSA, says, the opportunity to give back to the community that I grew up in has been one of the most rewarding parts of my job. So more assets include navigational. Again, some of them left their native country and they had to navigate themselves in this new culture of America. Some of them had changed majors. Some of them had little assistance and somehow they figured things out. They navigated themselves through with little or no assistance. And then they had what Jaime Escalante in the movie Stand and Deliver calls ganas. You want to do this. They wanted to get this degree. They wanted to graduate. They had this sense of perseverance and resilience and determination. So here's a student talking about giving back.
Scared. Because that means if I'm one of the first, I'm pretty much the one setting up the path for the ones that are coming behind me. And that means that whatever decisions I make or whatever path I choose to take, it's not only going to affect me, but it's going to affect everyone coming behind me, whether it's my sister, my neighbor, or just any female or Latina that's, you know, the next generation. And that's pretty scary because it's not just me anymore.
So I was really impressed with, I call that spiritual nobility. So we were talking about claiming the heart of education. And so I think that the heart of education is found in relationships. It's found in working with students in a holistic way and in a caring way, a compassionate way, in a way that, you know, is sympathetic. But how do we do this in teaching and learning? How do we work with students so that they engage in not only intellectual, but social and emotional development? And so I want to point out also that in the world right now, there are a lot of technological developments. And I read this book that really opened my eyes to the whole notion of AI, which is artificial intelligence. And it's all around us now, you know, from self-driving cars, from Alexa, you know, the Siri, you know, face recognition technology. And this is going to also turn into a crisis if we don't address it very well. And we need students that are going to help us to address this crisis. Where AI brings wonderful things, it's also going to bring disruption to job markets and result in more gross inequality. So what Kai-Fu Lee says that those that engage in AI and successfully innovate and apply and invest in AI will be the next generation of billionaires and trillionaires. But the other side of that is that there's going to be an underprivileged majority, those who lose their jobs to automation. And he says that AI is going to wipe out billions of jobs up and down the economic ladder. That includes accountants, assembly line workers, warehouse operators, stock analysts, quality control inspectors, truckers, paralegals, and even radiologists. And those are some of the fields that community colleges do very well in training students. So, you know, we need to pay close attention to this development, because what Kai-Fu Lee says is that within the next 15 years, AI will be able to replace about 40 to 50% of jobs in the US. So as I read that, it becomes important to say, okay, in the AI world, in the technology world, what are the new skills and competencies that students will need to learn to participate in the world of AI? So in terms of careers, these are phenomenal careers: AI engineer, machine learning engineer, data scientist, business intelligence developer, research scientist. And then what do they need to know? Well, obviously they're going to need to know the intellectual piece of all of this, mathematical and algorithms knowledge, probability and statistics, programming languages. But they also need to know skills that we haven't paid too much attention to. the skill of adaptability, the skill of critical thinking and creativity, the skill of emotional intelligence, the skill of communication. How much time are we spending building those skills? And at the same time, to top it off even more, we are having to deal with issues such as systemic racism in the world and in our nation, with virus outbreaks, coronavirus that we have now, COVID-19. I have a sense that's not going to be the only virus we're going to deal with in the future. We're dealing with, I'm not going to read all of those, but some of the most recent ones: state-sanctioned violence and anti-Black racism, police violence, gun violence, oppression of undocumented students, et cetera, et cetera. And this is an incomplete list. So my sense is that as we think about a post-pandemic model of education, of teaching and learning, what are the skills that students are going to need in order to help us to deal with these kinds of issues? With AI that is coming through and with the social issues that our nation faces. We've got tough times coming up. So here's some of the student outcomes that I thought would be important. I'm not going to read every detail here, but one of them is deep self-knowledge, what we are and represent, our intersecting identities, the exploration of the light and shadows of our existence, such as internalized racism and homophobia, aggression, and self-aggrandizement. Pluriversality. This is a beautiful skill that I think our students have, but we need to be more intentional at developing it. This is the ability to function from a space that goes beyond either or thinking, to embrace both and perspectives. It's the ability to see not just two realities, but multiple realities, so that more than one thing can be true at the same time. Pluriversality. Community building, critical consciousness, the ability to identify inequities and injustices and to take action to address them. The skill of empathy, to step into the world of the other with respect and dignity. The skill of compassion, caring and concern for others. Working with diversity, attending to our self-care, healing, and well-being. The skill of connectedness, our relationship to the other, knowing that the I is about the we. Presence, being aware and present in the moment, and sense of meaning and purpose, deep introspection to reveal the truth of one's being. What are we in the world for? So how do we build these skills knowing that we have all of these challenges that are coming our way? One answer is through what is called contemplative pedagogy, which is a teaching and learning experience that blends attention to both intellectual development and to the cultivation of the inner life. And to do that, we employ what are called contemplative practices to foster deep learning experiences. These contemplative practices quiet the mind in order to cultivate a personal capacity for deep concentration and insight. And there you see some examples of contemplative practices that can be used in the classroom, not every day. You may want to use them depending on the project that you have, and they're not all applicable at the same time, but they're just examples from periods of silence, art, poetry, free writing, music, moments in nature, ritual, journaling, community service work, etc. So my take on contemplative pedagogy is what I call senti pensante, sensing, thinking pedagogy. A beautiful word, and I'll talk about the origins of that word in a little bit. But senti pensante pedagogy is a deep learning experience that addresses the rhythmic connection between intellectual development and aspects of our humanity. And to foster that deep learning, we use illuminative knowledge tools. Again, they're like contemplative practices that include not only periods of silence, but things such as testimonios, ritual, cultural immersions, dance, prayer, altars, cultural healing practices, etc. And these tools are carefully selected, and they help students to go beyond intellectual understandings to include, for example, a sense of meaning and purpose, empathy, self-knowledge, pluriversality, and critical consciousness. And Senti Pensante Pedagogy also allows students to engage in learning projects that connect pedagogy to equity and justice. So I'm going to give you some examples of Senti Pensante Pedagogy. I'm going to begin with the example of my dear friend and colleague from Laredo, Texas, Dr. Norma Cantu. She's presently an endowed professor at Trinity University in San Antonio. She authored the book Canicula. Canicula are the dog days of summer in South Texas, which is like right now, which is over 100 degrees out here. So she features photographs from her childhood, and she writes from those photographs. And she has her students select photographs and write from those photographs. This is learning emanating, it's also validating. This is learning emanating from the student's personal experience. So here's Dr. Cantu talking about how she uses these photographs.
I guess the writing, whenever we work with writing, we're really working with spiritual things. And before I even wrote Canicula, I used to have an exercise for my students to remember a photograph of themselves as children and write about it. And I'm teaching description and commas, sentence combining and all this stuff. But I have them do these guided imagery exercises and they write. And one student was writing it, and it gets very emotional because it's about themselves and their families and all that. But I guide them. You know, we start with things that are more innocuous until we get to something that's more personal. And you know, they wrote it and went home. And they take it home. They read it in their small groups. They take it home, revise, edit, and then turn it in for me to grade. And this one student came back, and her eyes were puffy, and she said, "I cried all night." She says, "You have helped me to know my mother." How? I had asked them to write it. She went in, and the picture she remembered was of her mom and she with her siblings all huddled around her mother. And so she wrote about that picture, and then she started talking to the mother. And so no look me on. She was up working on that paper all night. Came back the next morning and told me this, and was so grateful. I can't say that I can't take credit and say I did it. I allowed it to happen. And those are the kinds of moments. I mean, this is just one example of how something worked.
So let me give you another example, and I love this project. I use this with my master's and doctoral students who are student affairs administrators. It's the art-based cajita project. You see one of my students, Nabor, and his cajita, which is a box, and that box can take shape in many ways. The students get very creative with this. And he talks about when his parents crossed over to the United States from Mexico, and in that box were fruits. They were laborers in the fields. Nabor has earned a doctorate, so I'm very, very proud of him. And the person who introduced me to the Cajita Project was Professor Alberto Pulido, who's now at the University of San Diego. Here's Dr. Pulido talking about the Cajitas Project.
So this box here was done by a student named Valerie Barra, and the title you can see on the top sheet. I usually ask students to write like a narrative, which the students here today did a great job in. And it's called My Life as a Mestiza, Valerie Barra. And the little that I know about it, the discussions that we had about it, was that she considers herself part Chicana and part Apache. And so when you look at the imagery in terms of the symbols, you see some of the traditional symbols that you would see in terms of being Mexicana or Chicana and that whole process. But then you see some of the Native American influence. And she did all these kind of different symbols around here. You can see, Christian symbols and Native American symbols. Up on top, which you can't get access to. There's an actual field of an agricultural field. There's an eagle that's been carved in. There's a horse. There's some Native American symbols as well. And I think it just captures what the students were talking about in terms of those dualities and living in those multiple worlds.
So the cajitas can be used in a diversity of courses. Like, for example, I use this with my doctoral and master's students who are going to be student affairs administrators, because I wanted them to think about and reflect upon, not just about the students saying, I'm going to be working with those students out there. I wanted them to think about, who are you? What are the skills and the gifts that you bring to this relationship with students? Who has influenced you? Why do you want to be a student affairs administrator? What is the impact that you're going to have or that you want to have? Those were some of the questions that I asked students to reflect on as they constructed their cajitas. So here's some examples of the cajitas. This is one evening. They're usually brought the last day that we meet. We have a meal before, and then all of the cajitas are viewed in silence. And then I ask for volunteers because everything is on a volunteer basis because they're very personal. And I have to say that by the time we end the class, there's hardly a dry eye because people share so many things that reveal more about who they are and what they care about and their experiences in life and the challenges that they've overcome. So this Cajita project is a very, very powerful illuminative knowledge tool. So one more example. This is from my dear friend, and I consider him one of my life mentors, Dr. J. Herman Blake. He's now retired from Iowa State, taught African American studies. And the tools that he uses to foster deep learning include audio narratives, photos, music, and reflective practices. So let's hear from Dr. Blake.
I use in the class some of my own material, my own research. I have them listen to, for example, when I talk about slavery, I have them listen to an interview done in 1968 with a woman whose mother was a breeder. And it was her mother's job to have babies. And this woman taught, she was the 15th child of this woman, born just after peace declared, as she put it. She was, I think, 94, 98 or something like this. And I have a picture of her, which I show along with the transcript. I want to tell you, you can't hear that and walk away without thinking. When I get to talking about terrorism and violence, I use about 6 or 7 slides from that book, Without Sanctuary. And I raise 2 questions. Why do they lynch people? And then I show the pictures of the crowds who came to enjoy the spectacle, including young children. And one student wrote an essay saying this course is not only about learning, this course is about thinking. And you think all the time. I use music because the music was used by the people to illustrate these points. So when they hear this woman whose mother was a breeder, I play for them the spiritual, Lord, how come me here? I wish I never was born. When they see those slides about how people have been misused and mistreated, I had them listen to Nina Simone singing Strange Fruit. I just gave a lecture on the civil rights movement. And at the beginning of the 20th century, I had them listen to spiritual, Lord, I couldn't hear nobody pray, talking about the loneliness.
So there you can see that Dr. Blake is not your ordinary history professor. Yes, he covers all the content. I mean, he has students read, 16, 18 books per semester, but he also engages students in deep learning, basically using tools such as music and the photographs, very, very powerful learning where students are not just engaged intellectually, but emotionally as well. So some of you in STEM would say, well, how do we do this in STEM? I mean, to me, STEM has a lot of wonder, a lot of awe in it. I'm not a scientist, but I can tell you that there are many, many issues related to STEM where you could do some very exciting projects. For example, water quality, we saw it in Flint and elsewhere, climate change, mental health, diabetes and all kinds of diseases, drought, hurricanes, flooding, declining infrastructures and disease outbreaks. How about involving students in service learning where they journal what they're learning and interview people as they're doing that? What about a photo exhibit? What about doing a digital storytelling project? What about creating a documentary on their project? These are examples of how students can not just learn the content, we certainly want them to do that, but also to get more deeply involved in what they're learning so that they develop these additional skills such as empathy and compassion and pluriversality, the ones that we talked about earlier, so that those skills can also be developed. So to prepare for Senti Pensante pedagogy, contemplative education, it's important that faculty get preparation in terms of developing a personal contemplative practice. Some of my own practices include meditation and prayer. But people have different ones, such as yoga, writing music, walking in nature, etc. Whatever it is, select something that's going to help you to really examine your inner life a lot more. And right now with the pandemic, we're given the opportunity to be more reflective, to be more introspective, to do the things that we had not done before. And then applying equity and justice-based theories, becoming aware of student backgrounds and strengths, knowing about marginalized communities, understanding the strengths of those communities, and developing the ability to employ holistic equity and justice-informed pedagogies, and professional development in the uses of contemplative practices, or what I call illuminative knowledge tools. So how did I get the word senti pensante? It's a beautiful word. It actually comes from the fishermen of the Colombian coast. When I was writing my book, Senti Pensante Pedagogy, I didn't know what to call the pedagogy that Norma Cantú did, or that Alberto Pulido did, or that Herman Blake did. I didn't know what to call it. And when I asked them, they would say, we don't have a name for it, we just do it. So a student from UCLA came to my office and said, you need to read Eduardo Galeano's book, The Book of Embraces. And I went to that book, and in that book was this short, very powerful narrative called The Celebration of the Marriage of Heart and Mind. Why does one write if not to put one's pieces together? From the moment that we enter school or church, education chops us into pieces. It teaches us to divorce soul from body and mind from heart. The fishermen of the Colombian coast must be learned doctors of ethics and morality, for they invented the word senti pensante, feeling, thinking, to define language that speaks the truth. And so there was my word. So I called the pedagogy senti pensante, feeling, thinking pedagogy. And it was those fishermen of the Colombian coast that Orlando Fals Borda, a Colombian researcher and sociologist, actually went to learn from them and how they fished. And they told Fals Borda, somos sentipensantes. You know, we've learned, I mean, they didn't have the education that you and I have, but they knew things. They had their ways of knowing. They knew the currents. They knew the sun. They knew the moon. They knew the times to fish. And so they were sentipensantes. And that's what I think that more of us should be, sentipensante faculty. And so we find ourselves at a moment of time that is totally remarkable. The last pandemic was about 100 years ago in 1918. So we got dealt that card. It's a tough card. But as educators, we're being asked, I believe, to create a new post-pandemic vision of education. And in that vision is attention to the heart, because I believe that the heart is found in validating students and building relationships. The heart is found in working with students as human beings who have assets that help them thrive and survive. The heart is found working with a pedagogy that addresses all of our humanity, as well as equity and justice issues in our society. This is our time. This is our moment that may not come again. This thing only comes around maybe once in our lifetime. But I think we can meet this moment with hope, with opportunity, with our wisdom, with our own ways of working collectively, with our colleagues, with others, with our friends, to transform education. And so I wish you well as you move forward with responding to this call to action to address not only the mind, but the heart of education. Thank you so much for the invitation. And Mays, I think I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rendon. So we are going to, we have time for questions and answers, and I'm going to start with what you ended with. So you say you're inviting us, you propose a call to action to attend to the heart of the students.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to you is, and I'm wondering if you could talk about the heart of the faculty. And a lot of my colleagues, I got to see behind the scene and how much they worked over the weekend, in the evenings, spending their spring break, really to do justice by the students. A lot of them are underpaid, adjunct faculty, contingent faculty. This is not just at Pima, but across the nation. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how institutions can do right by them, their hearts, their well-being.
Absolutely. That's a very, very important question, Mays. Recognizing the moment, part of the moment includes a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And we're human beings. We're faculty, we're staff, but we're also human beings. We have families. All of us have I think by now we all know someone, that is kind of close to us who is impacted by the virus. So these are very, very, very challenging times. I think something that education has not done, that I think we need to be more intentional about, is to create a space for faculty and staff that is concerned with healing and with self-care. Somehow, I think in many places what happened when all of this hit us, and I always think about, the way that I think of this is that we were kind of walking along and then somebody just threw us off the cliff and we were like, whoa, yeah, there was no preparation. There was no one who was there holding our hand. We were just thrown off that cliff and we're just still climbing out of it. And we're making a lot of mistakes and a lot of people are perishing along the way. So I think that sense of chaos and that sudden change is very traumatic. It's something that you talk about, Maze. You know, it's about trauma. And I think that built into 2- and 4-year colleges, there ought to be some space, some center, some institute that concerns itself with addressing trauma through healing and self-care, not just for faculty and staff, but also for students, and to be much more intentional about that. Because I think that part of what happened is that as we got thrown off the cliff, people acted as if nothing was going on. Okay, let's just do it. We got to do this. We got to do that. Wait a minute. I mean, yes, we have to do these things, but we also need to now attend to our well-being. We need to pause a little bit, give people a break, some time to breathe, and get themselves back together. And I know some places are doing some webinars along these lines, which I think is good. But I also believe that for many colleges and universities, the attention is more on online learning and getting all that work done, and not enough on dealing with the trauma and this and dealing with self-care and dealing with helping people to deal with the chaos that they're dealing with. Anyway, that's kind of a long-winded way to answer your question. I hope that I answered it.
You did. I mean, it's really important. A lot of times when I'm having a hard time falling asleep, I imagine what I would do. And there are times where I think if I win the lottery, everybody gets 2 weeks off, just do nothing. And so it is important. I have another question, and you touched a little bit on that. The theme of spirituality appears throughout your work a lot, and you're intentional to distinguish that from religion and religiosity. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that theme and why it is important for you and for higher education, especially in this moment.
Right. I think religion is a very personal thing. I mean, some people have a religious practice or a religious affiliation. So I didn't want to turn this into a religious viewpoint, but it can be a spiritual viewpoint, which I think is much more open-ended and much more attuned to, for example, meaning and purpose, caring, empathy, compassion, love, healing, but also social action. Because as I started writing Senti Pensante Pedagogy, and it's now been over 10 years, so time flies, I saw that many organizations that were dealing with spirituality, it was more about feeling good, that you meditate, you relax, and your body feels good. There's something to be said for that, okay? But what I wanted to do is as we are turning inward, as we are being more introspective, as we are examining ourselves and looking at our strengths and those things that we don't want to talk too much about because there are weaknesses, there are shadows, that we get stronger as human beings, and that we take these strengths to address the social inequities in our society. So the spirituality, as I see it, is both for personal development, but also for social change.
Thank you. I have a question here. How do we connect learning objectives and the role of teaching to learn, especially in STEM courses? You touched on that a little bit. And I'm wondering, there are a couple of questions about STEM and about math, and how can this be integrated in those courses? Okay, well, I did give some examples of that. And again, I have to say I'm not a STEM faculty member. So I come into this from having talked with STEM students and some STEM faculty. But I think there are a number of things to think about here. One is to look at the courses that your institution has in STEM and see which ones are high failure. That, just students are not doing very well. Oftentimes they're biology and chemistry, the foundational courses, so to speak, and analyze those courses. And
to turn that failure around, to make it more successful, I think that the STEM curriculum and the STEM pedagogy has to relate to student lives. To, yes, cover all the other stuff that's in the book, but give them a project that is experiential in nature, that allows students to engage in an activity in their communities, that helps them to see, what they're learning is applicable. It's really applicable to something that they care about. Again, this is also leveraging their asset of giving back. So, we don't do enough to leverage that asset. And I think students will respond very well when they're given assignments that allow them to engage in a project that they know is going to have a beneficial impact on their community. So I think it calls for us to be much more creative, much more attuned to the notion that we're educating not just for content, but to help students be better human beings and to help the world thrive. I mean, STEM is, my God, it's phenomenal. I mean, that work is phenomenal. I mean, I started out doing research on STEM, and I think I would be a multimillionaire by now if I had continued with that. So you have a fan with regard to STEM. But I also believe that sometimes STEM is taught in a very dry, perfunctory, manner that doesn't relate to anything that who the students are and what they care about. And I think that needs to be turned around.
Thank you. I would also think that empowering the faculty to be creative and to go outside the box is really critical.
Absolutely. You're right on that, Mace.
So there's a question that was actually submitted earlier asking if you received any pushback doing this work from colleagues, from students, and how you handled it.
I think initially when I first started out, I was a little nervous because, most people know me for my work on student retention issues and, research models and all that. I mean, I can do all of that, but I wanted to do something different, not just because it was different, but because I thought this is really what's missing in education. And so I engaged in this work because I truly believed in this. And I had the experience at the time of being a Fetzer Fellow, and everybody there was aligned to my thinking. And so I had that support. I had the support of the faculty that I interviewed who were doing this work. And so sometimes as faculty and as staff, we need to take calculated risks. And we need to do the things that we know within our own heart is what's right. Especially at this time in our lives. I think senti-pensante pedagogy or contemplative pedagogy, whatever, deep learning, whatever you want to call it, especially at this time is when we need it. This is when we need this kind of work. This is what I believe has been missing. This is what I believe ought to be a part of this post-pandemic vision of education. Now, not everyone's going to be on board with it, and I understand that. Look, lecture is not for everybody. Collaborative learning is not for everybody. I mean, if this is not for you, if you find this like, whoa, no, this is not something I believe in at all, then maybe this is not for you. This is open to people who really believe in this kind of work, who really believe that education goes beyond intellectual development. And so if you are one of these individuals, then I would encourage you to look at this work. But I would also encourage you, and this is what I tell my students all the time, to take it to a higher level, to create your own vision, write your own book, do your own work, and take it to a higher level. What I've contributed are just a few seeds here and there. And right now I'm actually in the process of updating Senti Pensante Pedagogy. I just have a lot of work that always gets in between here. But I am going to update it just from having learned more things along the way. But I think that this work is open to anyone wanting to do their take on contemplative education.
Thank you. I have a more of a practical question. You taught a lot for years, and I'm wondering if you were teaching this fall, online, remote, hybrid, what matters? What would matter to you this fall? What would be the first thing you're going to teach and focus on?
The first thing that comes to mind is relationships. I mean, this is a very, very tough time. It's unprecedented in our lifetime. So I don't think we can do things exactly the same way. I mean, I think that there are strengths of the past that we need to keep, but there are weaknesses of the past that we need to change. And I would want to examine what those weaknesses are and then turn them around so that I move forward in a new way that is more aligned to where we are today. So I think I would focus more on caring and building a relationship with my students, and also selecting a curriculum and learning projects where they're allowed to engage in this type of deep learning.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a question that was shared earlier about raising consciousness. You often talk in your work about higher education, educators, the need for us to raise consciousness of the work that we do of higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that. What does that mean? And what does that look like in action?
Right, and this is something that I'm going to add to my updated book. I'm going to, turn to the work of my fellow Tejana, Gloria Ansaldúa, and align my work to her philosophical viewpoints. She talks about a term called conocimiento, which is this heightened consciousness. And basically, we get to conocimiento by going through a number of stages, and she doesn't talk about the stages always happening in a linear fashion, but there are stages nonetheless. The first stage, for example, take the pandemic, the first stage she calls el arrebato, the loss of foundation. We certainly felt that loss of foundation. I mean, particularly around March and April. We're kind of getting used to it now in a way. I hope we don't get too used to it, but that was the real shocker. So that's her stage number one. Number two, she calls nepantla, which is an Aztec word for liminality, for being in an in-between space. So we find ourselves in the world that we knew and in the new world that is emerging, and right in the middle. It's not a fun stage because it creates a lot of tension and uncertainty. We don't really know what to do, but that's the second stage. But it is also a space of opportunity. It's a space to create change. And then she moves on to all of the other stages. I don't have the model in front of me, but as you move through these 7 stages of conocimiento, basically the message there is that if we've learned the lessons of that shock, that loss of foundation, we can come out stronger. And so we can walk in the world with knowledge and wisdom. The pandemic being only one example, but we have lots of arrebatos in our life. The death of a parent or a child, cancer, a horrible accident. I mean, there's lots of them. And we can either say, oh my God, this is so overwhelming that I'm going to die. I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to hold this feeling of inaction. Or we can say, no, this is not going to get to me. This is something that came into my life for me to learn from, and I'm going to make some changes as a result. And as I make those changes, I'm going to be stronger. And so Anzaldúa, has these 7 stages of conocimiento. That's a heightened sense of consciousness. And essentially, that's exactly what I mean, walking in the world with knowledge and wisdom. The older that we are, and I'm much older now than I used to be, and all of us are, but that's why they say, as you get older, you acquire wisdom. If you've learned the lessons, if you haven't learned the lessons and you're stuck and you're resistant and you don't want to learn, unfortunately, you're going to go up with a lot of bitterness, a lot of frustration. But if you learn from those experiences, as horrible as they may have been, and what I've endured is nothing compared to what others have endured. We just had that blast in Beirut.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you saw this beautiful video of this grandmother and the way she dealt with her pain. And, they were filming all around her with a blast and her home destroyed, but her piano was still there. She sits at the piano and she plays Auld Lang Syne. And that is the way that she was dealing with that pain. So we all have our ways of dealing with these arrebatos, with these losses of foundation. But they're there, as horrible as they may be, they're going to happen. We can't stop suffering. Suffering will be there, like it or not. We can't stop it. But what we can do is learn from it. What we can do is say, this is not going to get to me, I'm going to get stronger. And as we do that, that's when we acquire not just knowledge, but wisdom.
Thank you. So I should tell the audience that recently I sat down and had an interview with Dr. Rendon, and I kept looking at the clock, and my heart was really trembling that, time was going to end. And I was really sad. And then I thought, I can drive to Texas and go,
You're more than welcome.
and go meet with her. So I'm really grateful for your wisdom and expertise and just healing presence. I think we have time for 2 more questions. And I'm wondering, in your research, you talk about the importance for students to see themselves in knowledge. I'm wondering if you could talk about the importance for students to see themselves in the professors, in the teachers. Where I'm getting to with that is the demographics of our students are rapidly changing, yet the academy and those who are in positions to teach and work with students are not aligned with that changing demographics. And how important is that? And what should institutions do about that?
Right, and they haven't been aligned in a while. And obviously, super important for students to see people that are representative of their culture. That's another way of validating students, by having their culture represented within the campus culture. And so I think we need to be more intentional about that in terms of our hiring practices, and in terms of ensuring that we're going to do all we can to build equity in terms of our hires, and to make sure that whoever we hire is willing to learn more about the community, learn more about the strengths of the community, learn more about the strengths of the students, learn more about what it takes to help these students to thrive and to learn and to succeed, to be validating agents. All of that faculty development is needed.
Thank you. And the last question I have for you is, how can faculty support each other in the upcoming semester?
Good question. If it were possible, to create a utopia, so to speak, where every faculty and staff member would feel cared for and supported. I'm not sure what it would take, but I think, especially at this point in time, faculty need to be treated not just as faculty, but as human beings. And that's going to take a new belief system. And the belief system being that permeating throughout Pima is not just an emphasis on learning and college completion, but an emphasis on the caring and well-being of every faculty, staff, and student on that campus. And to send that message out consistently and to walk the talk when it comes to caring and self-care. I think that would go a long way. So let me know if you do it, because you might be the first campus to do it.
We will, and we are going to televise the revolution.
Absolutely fantastic. I love revolutions.
Yes, yes. So on that note, I'm so grateful for your presence and wisdom and healing and your humanity. And I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Duran Cerda.
Muchísimas gracias, doctora. This was such an inspiring, emotional. I think a lot of us were in tears as you were speaking and sharing your own story and your ideas and pedagogy.
Thank you.
It was so inspiring and insightful. It really lifted our hearts, minds, and souls. And I think we all feel empowered as the fall semester approaches. And we're still in this global pandemic, but you have created that inspiration for all of us and that call of action. I wanted to share with you and with our audience. I was a faculty member for 10 years and in the World Languages Department. And I did teach Spanish for heritage learners or Spanish speakers. And one of the projects I had them do were, it reminded me when you shared about the cajitas.
Mm-hmm.
So I had them work on testimonials,
Mm-hmm.
where they created basically a scrapbook, not a cajita, but a collection of interviews with a family member and photos and descriptions of that and of what they learned about their family member and their identity. And I just remember one of my students who interviewed his grandmother and found out, he never knew, didn't realize that his grandmother had been a nurse during the Mexican Revolution.
Wow.
And so he felt empowered and connected to his grandmother because of that. And so thank you so much for sharing the cajitas
Sure.
pedagogic strategy as well. In the chat session, one of our faculty members, Jennifer Catcher, mentioned, because you talked about creating a space for faculty and staff. And she said that the Teaching and Learning Center that Mays is coordinating is serving as that, and it's growing.
Great.
As faculty feel comfortable going to all the webinars and workshops and professional development opportunities. So I think through the Teaching and Learning Center, we can help our faculty thrive. And like you said, creating a utopia and for faculty to feel supported and validated and cared for. So that is, I think, that is my goal. That will be my goal as provost.
Thank you.
Definitely, you're welcome. Some other thoughts that came to mind, you said about building relationships with students and caring. That is so important, especially now, because many are not used to the virtual environment. So we have to think of ways of retaining them and engaging them just in conversation and treating them as human beings and as well as students. And of course, having expectations for the course, but remembering that they're juggling with the new reality too. Perhaps they're single parents, perhaps they don't have the technical needs that they need. doing, also working or have lost a job. So there are a lot of issues that they're dealing with as they're completing their studies. So we have to keep that in mind. And, your call of action, this is our time, this is our moment. I completely agree and support that. We're ready to create change. And thanks to you and your words, we will do that. You brought hope and opportunity and wisdom to all of us. And collectively, we will work together to make that transformation. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I received an email from someone from Middle Tennessee State University thanking us for this opportunity. And so I'm so grateful that everybody has, not only in the Tucson area, our friends and community members and family at Pima, but across the nation. So it's a blessing. Thank you very much for joining us. And Doctora Rendon, I hope you'll visit us again and perhaps to see you and meet you in person. That would be just lovely. And Mays, thank you for your role in putting this together and the whole team. So muchas gracias. Thank you for everyone. And I'll pass it back to Mays because I think you have some more things to share what the next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you. And what we are going to do for the faculty and staff, I'm going to stop the recording. So we are actually going to go into breakout sessions. Please check your email for the links to the breakout sessions. When you leave the Zoom link, you will automatically receive a sign-in sheet. Make sure you sign in. In that sign-in sheet, I put the information for the breakout rooms. And thank you very much. And I'm gonna just play some music for you. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Dr. Rendon will be with us tomorrow.